There. I see you. You can't hear me?
No, I'm just kidding.
You jerk.
You were going to say dick, weren't you?
Maybe. I'm in a mood, man.
I felt that hard D sound coming. You jerk.
I'm learning to curb that part of myself.
Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation and all things. I am Michael Gray.
And I am Erin Green.
What is going on?
Nothing much. My cat just came in, and every time he comes in, I can see him come through the cat flap behind my computer screen, and I've got to do a quick check and make sure he doesn't have a bird in his mouth. Springtime, he tends to do that, and that would make for a really interesting introduction, everybody.
That would be a wonderful introduction if all of a sudden there's a bird flapping around and you freaking out. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Let's not do that. Yeah.
Let's not. Yeah. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Good. Busy morning, and it's sunny, and I'm starting to watch the bushes and trees kind of start to bloom outside my window. It's nice.
Ours are doing that too. Lila just a little bit ago, she was like, "Daddy, come look at the trees." Like, yeah, lots of green.
I know.
Exciting.
It's funny. I do enjoy winter and I love the snow, but there is something about springtime and everything coming to life that just feels really cool.
Really cool. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So Aaron and I we have like a kind of a crazy week. I was gone last week. I'm going to be gone for a few days at the end of this week. She's going out of town for 9 days. So we both have like short work weeks, trying to get a lot of stuff prepared. And we're cramming in 2 episodes. We're recording back-to-back episodes this week. So we're both a little like,
yeah, it's
frazzled and stressed.
And it's funny. We were just talking before we got on here that we encourage our clients all the time and our friends, to take a step away from work, that self-care time, unplug and recharge your own batteries. And here Michael and I are trying to just cram everything we can into these shortened work weeks or before we're preparing to leave. So everyone, we understand, we get it. We know this is hard, especially when you're in a coaching kind of role, and that keeping that dialogue and that frequency of connection with clients is really critical to what we do. It can be really challenging to step away from that. But I've given all of my clients fair, advance warning that, hey, I'm going to be out of town, and I'm sure they honor that and appreciate that. I need my vacation too. But it's kind of a crazy week. And the best part is that we are actually going to be in the same town Thursday, Friday.
Yeah. We actually. So when was the last time we physically saw each other?
It had
I think Lila was like 2.
Yeah.
I feel like it was at Piper Pub, which I heard is closed down, which just sucks. I love that restaurant.
It's Tupelo Honey now. It's like a
I've heard that place is pretty good.
I've never been because it opened right at the beginning of COVID lockdown. So we tried, I know we tried going because it has that balcony, that really cool kind of, balcony seating, but it was completely full when we tried going on a nice weekend last year. So we'll try now that things are starting to look better. But so
I feel like that was the last time. And I think Lila she's almost 10, and she was probably like 1 or 2. It's been a long time.
I feel like it's been a very long time.
Yeah.
I know.
But you saw Kathleen and the girls, a couple of years ago? Right? Yeah. It's been a long time. So I'm hoping it works out that we can actually get together, because that would be
we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. I mean, we're close to downtown, and Matt and I can just buzz down and see you, but how cool. I mean, we talked about what if we recorded an episode together, like in the same spot. And, what if, I don't know, there's so many
Yeah.
possibilities that we could do to promote Middleish being in the same town. But I
Mm-hmm.
also get that it's for vacation and not work that you're coming. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
plan another
know.
trip when you
We
can
will.
come and do some work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So
Speaking of work,
speaking of
um,
work,
I did some homework last night
you did?
for this
Was it
episode.
algebra? Oh, okay. I
No,
thought maybe it
no
was just like for
algebra.
fun.
I left algebra alone. No, no.
Did you write a
This
book report?
I I did not. I watched a movie
Oh,
to get
yeah.
ready for this recording. We are talking about emotional awareness today, and
Mhm.
particularly how it relates to emotional eating. And I told you when we finished our recording yesterday that
Mhm.
I really want to watch the movie Inside Out, a little Disney Pixar movie. I've only seen it once and it's just
Mhm.
adorable. I know all
It's
the
great.
characters. And so I told Michael I should watch that movie because I think it does a really good job of illustrating how our emotions not only play off of each other, but how something that's happening inside of us that we can't really see. Disney did a fantastic job of putting characters and
Yeah,
faces and names onto these things.
they
And
really did.
we'll talk a little more about how that can be important for all of you. But I sat down. Matt was at home working, and I sat on the couch and I start watching Inside Out, and he could hear that there was some Disney movie going on. And he's like, "What are you watching?" And he comes in, and I told him why I was watching it, not only because it's a fantastic movie, but we're talking about
Just work,
emotional
Matt.
awareness.
I'm working right now.
I said, I paused it and I said, I'm doing some research for my podcast tomorrow. And he just looks at me and very seriously said, I'm really impressed how well you do, preparing for those and taking this very seriously. And I'm kind of laughing. I'm like, I'm watching a Disney movie to prepare, just like watching The Office. I mean, I watched all 9 seasons of The Office to prepare for parts of this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. And for life. Like the office just prepares you for life
Oh,
too.
yes,
Yes. Yeah. You
absolutely.
are better equipped for whatever life
I
throws at you now.
Yeah, and when people say that's what she said,
Hmm.
I get it. I mean,
Yeah.
it means something to me. So these things have value.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
watching Inside Out, man, I think some of the most powerful takeaways for me are, first of all, yes, it gives emotions names and faces, so you actually sort of separate yourself from the emotion. So it is this thing that you can tangibly name or
Mhm.
identify that is kind of separate from you and your behaviors and how you react to that emotion. And we'll talk a little more about that. But then also, I think through the eyes of a child, I
Yeah.
think makes a big difference because as adults, we have learned different ways of coping with or ignoring emotions.
Yeah.
And it's very unfortunate that we have sort of been taught or groomed in a lot of ways by society or family expectations or whatever to not express our emotions,
Right.
not let them uh, get answered or be dealt with or be expressed in certain ways. So I thought that is really important to watch how this little girl kind of navigates some of these emotions and then watching how she outwardly responds to them, says
Mhm.
things or behaves in certain ways. So that's another important piece we'll talk about. And then also that all of the, I mean, we want joy to just be this overwhelming, always there, joy is in charge. She needs to be happy. Joy keeps
Yeah.
saying she needs to be happy. She needs to be happy. But then in the end, you learn that all of these emotions are really important. Sadness is critical
Hmm.
to then feel joy,
Yeah.
and anger is critical in certain situations so that you can handle what is going on and fear and, all of
Yeah.
these things. So,
Yeah.
anyway, it was really
Absolutely.
fun to relive that.
It's a really well done movie. And I remember seeing that with Lila. I think we saw it in the theater the first time. Maybe it was at home. But anyway, watched it the first time. And it sparked a lot of good conversations, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a wonderfully done movie. It's really fun. It's funny, but it's also pretty heavy in some spots. Like
Mm-hmm.
it it tackles some stuff head on. Like it doesn't skirt around it. It's like, oh yeah, like we're gonna feel real sad for a little bit here,
Mhm.
and just the conversations that it sparked with Lila were just really cool about why we feel the way we do and why it's okay to feel what you feel, right? Like none of these emotions are bad. None of the
Mhm.
things we feel just naturally are bad, and it's okay to feel them and let them kind of get big at times, and then how do we it just yeah, it's such a great movie.
I know. And then I mean, leave it to Disney Pixar to throw in some humor for adults. So things like the gum commercial that just pops into your head and like how the little people in the brain that are
Mm-hmm.
deciding which memories to pull out. They're like, let's just throw this one in for good measure. And so you've got this stupid like jingle from a gum commercial. I mean,
Yeah.
who can't relate to that piece? And then the way the mother's little emotional center and the father's little emotional
Mhm.
center, she's like very in tune with what's going on with the daughter at dinner. And then it shows the dad and they're all watching sports and they're
Yeah.
all like not even paying
Not even pay
attention.
attention.
Or the teenage boy at the very end when Riley talks to the little teenage boy and in his emotional center they just go nuts. Girl, girl,
Girl.
girl. I mean, it had me laughing out loud because I just
Yeah.
like,
It's a good movie.
oh, it's good stuff.
And it's perfect for this. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
do you want to dive into emotional eating? Just kind of what it is, and you want to start
Yeah.
there?
And then and talk about why emotional awareness is important when it comes to eating.
Right. Right.
Um, one of the most common things I hear from people is that they'll say, I'm a stress eater,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm an emotional eater, or they know this about themselves. I have found that a lot of my clients are aware of these kinds of behaviors, and it honestly has become so normative that we just eat out of stress. We
Mm-hmm.
see it on
Super common.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people crack jokes about it like I might as well just dive into a pint of ice cream or whatever. And I think part of that is important to acknowledge that this is a very normal human response
Mhm.
to feeling emotions, whether they're good emotions. So you might be excited or in a celebratory mood or something like that. And you might want to eat out of those emotions, or some of the more negative emotions that people identify, like loneliness or, boredom or stress or, feeling anxious, things like that. So I will hear from clients a lot that they know that they have these behaviors, yet they sort of feel shameful or guilty about it. And I really like to just let's talk about this and understand that eating due to an emotional response, answering that emotion with food is actually a very human thing
Right.
to do.
And not a bad thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's, I mean, it has a real stigma that if like I had a stressful day and I'm just feeling down and I have a bowl of ice cream, bad choice. You did a
Right.
wrong thing. And it's like everything. It depends. Like you have to have context, and you have to have like context over time too. You know what I mean? Because it's like I don't want to make the comparison of like ice cream to alcohol at all. So I'm not doing that. But it's like, if you have a drink sometimes versus if you're drinking all the time to escape and that's your only coping mechanism, well, that's a different thing. If
Mm-hmm.
the only way you can handle any emotional stress or upheaval is by eating, well, sure, it would be really good to have some other tools because that may work against you in a lot of ways. But to do it sometimes, to even consciously say, like, I had a crappy day, I'm just going to eat some ice cream and feel a little bit better. I don't think that's a bad thing,
Right.
at all. And
Right.
it depends, of course, on a lot of things, but in and of itself, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think food can be used to kind of get us out of some funk or give us some reprieve sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a solid choice sometimes.
And that's why we hear the term comfort food a
Mhm.
lot. So that might be a favorite food from childhood, or, the warm sort of like casserole or soup kind
Mhm.
of, foods. And again, comfort food exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And understanding that there is a physiological component to that, and there is nothing to be ashamed of
Right.
or to feel guilty about. When people feel shameful, when people feel guilty around food, and I've said this before, it's the belief that they have done something wrong.
Right. Made a bad
When they feel
choice.
shameful, yeah. And when they feel shameful, it is that I am wrong. Like I am, there is something that is about
Right.
me that is wrong.
It's an identity thing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Reflects who I am.
Yep. This is where it's really important to understand that, first of all, emotions are, and I will preface this saying that I am not a psychologist or an expert in this area. I would love to interview somebody who could probably explain a little more of the psychology, but emotions are not what you are, who you are.
No.
They are feelings. They are separate from you, and how you respond to them is a choice.
Right.
I'm putting that very simply because I know there are a lot of other factors going on. And for
Yeah,
some
very
people, it
nuanced.
isn't as simple as making a choice.
Yeah.
But on the whole, most of the people I work with, it really comes down to you are not this emotion. Understand how to name it, how to identify it, and kind of separate yourself from that emotion. And then that also leads to, identifying as an emotional eater. Well, sure, you might engage in answering an emotion through food. Again, very human and common kind of response. What else can you do to answer that emotion? And
Right.
we'll talk about some strategies with that a little bit later, because you and I, Michael, both have some great ideas. And then I have the intuitive eating book that has some really good
Yeah.
ideas too on
Yeah.
answering that emotion. But I think people get caught in this spiral where they believe that they are bad, or that they have done something bad. And that just precipitates more negative self
Right.
talk, more negative beliefs about yourself, and more negative emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
then what do? You answer those emotions again
And
through
the only
food.
way,
If you, yeah, yeah,
yeah, and I think it's such a good point you made, that identifying, and we can go into this kind of how to do that, but identifying what you're feeling is so critical, because knowing that you're emotionally eating, sure, super important, but just knowing that, what do you do with it, right? Like I kind of like make the parallel of like, okay, I'm a diabetic, right? So if I know I'm a diabetic, if I find that out, that's a good thing to know. I need to know that, right? But if that's all I know, how in the hell do I manage this? What do I do with it?
right,
I have the knowledge of what it is, but I don't have any place to go to manage anything. And I think it's kind of the same thing with emotional eating. It's really good to know that that's what you're doing. That's the first step, absolutely. But just identifying that you do that, how do we do anything? So
yeah,
I think the next step is to begin to, in those situations, figure out, what am I experiencing? What
mm-hmm.
emotion? So if I'm emotional eating, emotions are driving these hunger cues. They're not really hunger cues, but it feels like that, right? Um, then what emotions are driving that? What emotions am I experiencing in this moment that are presenting themselves as hunger, right? Or
Yep,
even just the cue to go eat. And so I think it's important to dig down into that and go, okay, what am I really experiencing right now? And I think one of the best ways to do that, what I do a lot with clients, is just tell them, like, listen, if you have that kind of cue, to go eat, when it's not like, ooh, it's a normal time to eat, or I haven't eaten for a while, that kind of thing, just stop and check in with yourself.
mm-hmm.
Like, just internally, what am I experiencing? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling mad? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling, stressed or lonely? What am I experiencing? And then there's a lot of ways this can go, but once we kind of identified like what's sort of the catalyst here, then we can do something about it. Because if I
Mm-hmm.
just know like, I'm feeling something and I want to go eat, I can't do much. But if I know, you know what, I'm really stressed about that conversation I had with my brother, or I'm, freaking out about that project for work tomorrow, or I just, I don't have anybody close in my life. I'm feeling really lonely. Well, there's things you can do for those specific situations. But we got to
Mhm.
know what's really going on if we're going to address it well.
Yeah, I love that term, checking in with
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and I use that a lot. If
Mm-hmm.
any of my clients are listening, they'll be like, "Yeah, I've been practicing this." And in my brief research, just looking up some of the studies on this, because I mean, I know through my practice and just my reading and my background that this is definitely a thing. Emotional awareness is tied with food intake, disordered eating, emotional eating, and that feeling of not being in control. And so I wanted to just look at some of the research, and I did learn a new word that ties into exactly what you were saying.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Let's see if I don't butcher it.
Okay.
Alexithymia.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of that?
No.
You, yeah. Michael trying to look smart for
You almost
everyone.
said it again. So I would like to just go on the record that Erin and I have been on this call for about, let's see, 30, 40 minutes. And she has almost called me a dick twice.
No, 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 no. That is not true.
It's not?
Now
Are
you're
you
no.
sure? Are
Yeah.
you? Because I think you almost just did. And you almost did earlier. Aaron,
Not
Aaron's had a
exactly.
stressful morning.
Aaron's doing just fine. I do not have alexithymia. I can identify exactly what I'm feeling right now, and I do
Oh, what
not
is
have
it?
to use that hard D in any of my language toward you.
Okay.
So, so alexithymia is the difficulty in identifying and describing emotions, and it's very clinical sounding term, and I think it's also something just to think about. How good are you at identifying your emotions
Mm,
and actually putting a name to it? Because the research is pretty clear that if you can name that emotion, then you can move into the language and the self-talk of I am feeling this. I am feeling angry. I am feeling overwhelmed. Instead of identifying with that emotion, I am overwhelmed. I am
right.
sad. So if you can, and I know this is semantics, and some people would be like, okay, is it really that big of a deal? Yes, it is,
Yeah.
because what you tell yourself matters. And especially when we're talking about the food world, people often don't connect their behaviors and their response to that emotion without actually internalizing their behaviors as this is what I do. And I've heard that before too. Well, this is just what I do. Food is my drug, food is my friend, food is my enemy, food is my coping mechanism. Food is my companion if they're
Mm,
feeling bored, instead of really identifying their behavior, as because behavior is something you actually do have control over. This emotion might hit you, but then how you interpret it and what you tell yourself about that emotion definitely makes a difference.
yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times semantics matter. I mean, I think we tend to view them as like insignificant, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it comes to how we communicate to others and to ourselves, semantics matter a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and to say that I feel angry versus I am angry, or I feel sad versus I am sad is a very different story that you're communicating with yourself. And I think you're also, if you're saying things like, I feel angry, I feel sad, you are, in a way, in my opinion, stating that I have some control here. If it's just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm this, there's sort of I'm at the whim of this emotion, I think, that you kind of communicate behind it versus, okay, I am me and I am feeling a thing right now. That's
Mm-hmm.
different. There's I think it kind of keeps you in the driver's seat and gives you a lot of responsibility and control over that.
Yeah. I found this great little study out of UCLA that talked about people that have a fear of spiders, which I can totally relate to because
Mm.
I'm getting actually a lot better
Yeah.
about it now that I'm into gardening and I know how good they are for my garden. I've got this catch and release policy in my household for the most part. But they conducted a study with four different groups and had one of the groups identify what they were feeling in a very vivid way. Like, I am afraid of this spider, and just identifying it. And then they had another group that was instructed to think differently about, yes, this spider is, appears threatening and is scary, but it can't hurt me, so I don't need to be afraid. So to kind of counter that feeling and that self-talk. And then the third group was instructed to say something totally irrelevant to the spider. So that might be like an avoidance or dissociation type of thing. And then the other one was, fourth group was instructed to say nothing at all. And they found that the people that could identify their emotion and understand why they were feeling the way they did, when they followed up with the spider and were asked to get as close to that tarantula as they could, and maybe even touch it if they could bring themselves to do that, they measured their palm sweat response, which is directly related to fear and anxiety, and found that those people that could name their emotion and actually talk themselves through it had a lower physiological response. So to me, this illustrates again the importance of being able to identify and name and sort of talk yourself through that emotional response.
Right.
And understand, like you just said, you check in with yourself, you kind of talk through and identify some of this. And this is some, again, I'm not a psychologist. This is something that if someone continually has challenges with emotional awareness and identifying this, work with a therapist that can help with this kind of stuff. It truly, truly can help if you find yourself unable to really navigate this world of emotions and put names to things. I think it is very worthwhile to get some therapeutic help with this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as you begin to try to do this, to try to identify what you're experiencing, expect to be bad at it for a little while. You may not be, but you very well may be, because I think a lot of times when emotional eating is either the go-to coping skill or the only coping skill, there's a chance that there may be a lot of avoiding what you're feeling, right? Like that often is part of it. I don't want to feel this anymore. I don't want to acknowledge it or deal with it. So I'm going to do something that takes that away. And if we have a history of avoiding how we're feeling, trying to figure out what we're feeling may be a little bit tough at first.
Right.
And if that's the case, that's not a bad thing. That's where you're at. And just know that it gets easier the more you do it. And I think, the more you try to identify exactly what you're feeling, the easier it gets. And I found this, Erin mentioned she had an emotional wheel thing, and I looked that up and found something completely different. But what I happened to stumble upon, I think fits right here. And it's kind of cool. Maybe we can share a link in the notes.
Yeah, we'll put these in the show notes, and you could even share it here on Zoom for those people watching on YouTube.
I guess I could do that, huh? Let me get it pulled up real quick.
Yeah, these wheels do exist, and I think they're very helpful to just start off identifying certain emotions and play around with them and become more aware.
Yeah. So can you see that there?
Yep. It's nice and big.
Nice and big. So, like, for example, we have in the center, there's like afraid, sad, dislike, alone, angry, and embarrassed. And then each of those kind of spoke out to other things, which spoke out into more things. So, like, under alone, you may be feeling withdrawn or detached or isolated or forlorn or deserted or forsaken or vulnerable or exposed or rejected, friendless, bleak, or destroyed, right? There's a lot of different things. And those kind of like come down the funnel. So, like, withdrawn or detached, you may be feeling distant, which is feeling alone. Isolated or forlorn, you may be feeling lonely, which is alone, right? And so I think sometimes the more options we have, like if we kind of work on the exterior of this wheel and work our way in, the more options we have. Like, I may not be able to quickly say, oh, I feel alone, but I might be able to attach to, like, yeah, I feel isolated, or I feel vulnerable right now, or I just feel kind of bleak. And then, oh, okay, so what that's stemming from is a feeling of being alone. And then that gives you, an opportunity to kind of handle that directly. But we'll link this in the show notes. But I think this is really helpful. I've never seen this before until today. But I think could be a really good tool for figuring out exactly what am I experiencing right now, because it gives you a bunch of options of emotions. I mean, I wouldn't have come up with a quarter of these options
Yeah.
for emotions. I feel
Well,
bad, sad, and
man,
happy.
it just shows you how complex this can be
Mm-hmm.
with naming and identifying emotions. And I also think one of the other things I was reading that spoke to me was understanding that the emotional state is temporary, which I think often we'll get kind of caught up in how
Mm-hmm.
we're feeling. And especially if it's all those emotions that you just shared on that wheel were pretty unpleasant emotions.
Right.
The wheel that I found had some
Had some happy things.
admiration. Yeah, it had some amazement, admiration, and some of these other serenity, some of these other
Mm-hmm.
emotions that are feel good emotions. And understanding that of all of the emotions that you have experienced over your lifetime, have any one of those emotional states truly been how you have felt permanently? Like,
Right.
have they stuck with you permanently? Chances are you have gone from different emotional
Yeah.
states, throughout your life at different points in your life. And yes, sometimes things feel like they're not going away.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can identify that feeling as temporary, and there again, we'll get into some of the ideas of how you can help cope with some of those less desirable emotions. I think that can also help with, some people will engage with eating in response to those emotions because they need something that is definite, it's tangible, and there is an end
Right.
to it.
Right.
So if you're feeling like this emotion is never going to go away, but you finish off that pint of ice cream, and that end point of that pint of ice cream means that you have coped with that emotion,
Mm-hmm.
it gives you kind of this tangible process that you have gone through and this behavior that you have gone through that tells you that, okay, this should be over now. It's time to
Right.
move on. And I've talked with clients about this when we actually get to the end of that pint of ice cream or whatever it is, and I'll ask them, did that help? Like, do those behaviors actually help? And usually the answer is no. There's some
Mm-hmm.
other thing that has to happen or process that they have to go through to actually cope with and answer that emotion.
Right.
So I think that's another thing to be aware of, is that these feelings don't last forever. This
Right.
is temporary, and there are tools that you can develop
Right.
to
Yeah.
answer them. And one more thing is, I found this really interesting study for college women that it was a, I mean, relatively small sample size. It was 198, so less than 200 participants. And they found that these women that had low levels of attention to their emotion actually had the greatest caloric consumption. So again,
Mm-hmm.
that whole understanding that your emotions are related to
Yeah.
eating and how those play off of each other. And then one more actually took it a step further and said it wasn't just the emotional awareness that was important, it was actually expressing those
Mm-hmm.
emotions in a healthful way. So not just identifying this is what I'm feeling, but actually expressing it. And I think that is another really important factor. Again, just referencing Inside Out,
Mm-hmm.
when they first moved to the city, and the mom is kind of giving Riley the little pep talk and was like, okay, we need you to be happy for now, can you just be happy for dad?
Mm-hmm.
But sadness is obviously needing to be expressed, and she's
Mm-hmm.
having some of these overwhelming feelings of sadness or anger or fear, yet she's getting this message, can you just express joy?
Yeah.
Can you just be happy? I
Right.
think this study was really important just to see that the expression of the emotion is
Yeah.
just as critical as the identification of it.
Yeah. 100% agree. Because I think when we don't, like, if we're experiencing an emotion, it's that saying, hey, there's something here that needs attention. And if we don't give it attention, it's like sweeping it under the rug, right? Like we can
Mm-hmm.
maybe kind of keep it wrangled and whatever for a little bit, but it just kind of grows and grows and grows. And I think that's where, you see people acting out in certain ways or, exploding, with just all this emotional upheaval and, whatever is because it's not identified, it's not acknowledged, and it's not given attention. And the more we ignore it, I think the more kind of control it gets,
Mm-hmm.
versus if we can like bring it out into the light and say, I see you and you are this, and I acknowledge you for what you are. Well, then, it kind of reminds me of this story. I loved when I was a kid. We had these old records, little golden book records. Do you remember those?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And do you remember the one called "There's No Such Thing as a Dragon"? Do you
I
remember that
don't
one?
think so. No.
So this little boy, he wakes up one morning and there's like this little dragon in his room, and he's like, "Mom, there's a dragon." And she's like, "There's no such thing as a dragon, right?" And it grows a little bigger, and the more they don't acknowledge it, it keeps growing bigger. And pretty soon
Uh-huh.
it's like grows bigger than the house, and it runs after this, bread truck, and their house is gone. And finally they're like, okay, there's a dragon. And then it's like, all right. And it
You
shrinks
have to
back down,
acknowledge it.
yeah,
Yeah.
to this little manageable thing. And I think it's just a good illustration. I think that's how emotions go a lot. When they're left untended, they grow and grow and grow, and they can become incredibly unmanageable and destructive. Versus
Mm-hmm.
if we're like, okay, you are this, and I'm feeling this, and I give you attention, it can really kind of keep things under wraps a little bit better. And one of the ways I like to have clients do it, that was called the discomfort deal, is I think when we feel those unpleasant emotions, it's our knee-jerk response is make it stop, make it go
Yes.
away. It's kind of like hunger, like, oh, I'm hungry, I got to make it stop. It's like, well, you can be hungry for a little bit, like that's not a
Yeah.
terrible thing. you know Same thing with these emotions. And I think it can be helpful to sort of build some resilience and learn that, okay, I can be moderately uncomfortable for a little bit and still be okay. So if someone's having these emotional cravings, hey, set a timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and just sit with it. Just
Mm-hmm.
experience what you're feeling. And then when that
Or
timer's
journal
up,
about it. Do
yeah,
some, yeah,
yeah. And
just,
then when that timer goes up, go eat the ice cream if you want, or whatever. Like, go get the fast food, or whatever it is. But learn to be okay with being uncomfortable a little bit.
mm-hmm.
Learn to be okay with experiencing these things, and that we don't have to immediately, make them stop, and that learn that they need attention to be managed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just one of the terms that was used in this study I just mentioned is self-silencing. So
Ooh,
basically
yeah,
silencing, not expressing that
yeah.
emotion. And what you're describing is a kind of you know, a remedy to that,
Hmm.
sitting with it and actually feeling what you're feeling. And
Hmm.
I mean, I've been through some pretty shitty emotions before. I think we all have. You never want to just sit in it and feel it, but allowing yourself to feel it and express it in whatever way works for you
Yeah.
actually can help you process it. So again, going back to that, if I just finish this bag of chips, then I've processed and I'm over the emotion.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily how it works. And it
Right.
rarely does work. It's a very temporary remedy, instead of actually feeling and processing it. So be aware of some of that self-silencing,
Yeah.
which we often see in certain personality traits with disordered eating, where people are pleasers. They are very attentive to others' needs instead of their own. And so they will often practice some of these. I think self silencing is a really kind of powerful phrase to put that into
Yeah.
perspective.
Very.
Um,
It really paints a
and
picture.
one more thing about kind of sitting with that feeling, something that the authors of the intuitive eating book recommend when we talk about checking in with yourself. So this is where we get into some of the things you can do instead
Hmm.
of just diving into, let's answer this emotion with food. um they say the best way to gauge whether you're using food as an emotional fix is to ask yourself the following question: if my body only needs a certain amount of food to feel satisfied, but I continue to eat after I'm full, then what other need am I trying to fill with food? So asking yourself, and I'll practice this with clients a lot, what else might be at play here? And I have them write down some thoughts and some feelings or external influencers on this eating experience. So what else could be influencing the amount that you're eating, the type of food you're seeking, the quote hunger that you're feeling that might not be biological hunger, because we do know that human bodies need a certain amount of energy. I mean, the number is arbitrary, but we do know that there's a certain amount of energy and nutrition that human bodies need to function properly. Knowing that that is a finite kind of target, if you eat beyond that and you eat beyond that point of satisfaction and fullness, what else are you trying to fulfill there? What is
Right.
the purpose of that eating?
Right.
I think that's a really important, and it piggybacks onto your whole, sit with it, whether you have identified an emotion or not. Just let's kind of sit with this and just check in and see how things are going. This totally does not mean the whole, wait 10 minutes and then drink a big glass of water and ignore your hunger, or don't eat that food.
Right.
This is awareness.
Yeah. This isn't another way to try to white knuckle yourself thinner or whatever. It's not about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think too, what I like about that, just sitting with that discomfort, is it teaches us that we can handle uncomfortable things, and the more we do that, the more we can handle other uncomfortable things. Because honestly, I think a lot of us are really bad at that. Something uncomfortable or stressful or hard, and we're like, oh, make it stop or run the other way. And we often don't address these things or deal with these things or feel these things, experience these things head on, because we're worried about, we build them up in our head, what it's going to be like. And I think this can be the beginning to just handling a lot of that, is to sit for 5 minutes with this uncomfortable feeling and go, okay, I'm still here. Nothing terrible happened. Was it fun? No, but I'm fine.
Right.
We didn't, catastrophize, and make it this whatever. I'm fine. I can handle that. And then guess what? Next time you have a little social proof with yourself to go like, okay, it wasn't fun, but I did it last time. I can probably do it again. Maybe I can sit with it a little bit longer, and I think that's really important with emotional eating too, is just that being able to be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it is important to take that experiential learning and tell yourself that, hey, I can do this again. Nothing catastrophic happened. One of the challenges that clients will tell me is that they don't realize when they are eating out of boredom or an emotional response. So some of the common ones that I wanted to share were boredom and procrastination are two very common forms of emotional eating. Boredom, sure, I think it could be categorized as an emotion. Procrastination is a little more of a behavior.
Yeah.
Like you're seeking a distraction or something. I would say it's avoidance probably at work.
Yeah, I would say that.
And so that would maybe be on the fear or apprehension kind of scale, so maybe
like
if you
afraid.
So if you get to the deeper meaning of why are you procrastinating? Are you afraid that you're going to totally flop this presentation? Do you not know where to start? And so you're feeling overwhelmed, really kind of get to that granular level. But boredom and procrastination are really common ones that I will see where people say, I didn't even know I was doing it when this was happening. So I think pay attention to that one. Bribery and reward is, I think, a super common one, especially for athletes, because how many athletes have I worked with where they're like, I earned my beer today, at the end of a hard ride.
I worked hard so I can eat.
Yeah. Or we're going to go get a pastry after the morning run. Again, those aren't bad behaviors. Like there's nothing shameful or you shouldn't feel guilty about those things, but definitely be aware of the story you're telling yourself about certain foods and behaviors with food that is a bribery or reward. And unfortunately, this is started at a very young age, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you get your dessert if you clean your plate or whatever.
Eat all your vegetables and you can have some ice cream. Yeah. It's like, it's so hard not to do. I mean,
Hmm.
and I've probably said that a million times in my life, and every time I'm like, damn it,
I
no, that's
know.
not what I want to do. But it's what you grew up and it's what you know. And it's also like, I just want you to eat some freaking vegetables.
But unfortunately, it reinforces that
It
this food
absolutely does.
is more desirable than this
Hmm.
food. And
Yeah.
if
Do
we
the
have to
dumb
bribe
thing and then you
you,
can do the cool thing.
yeah, exactly. If
Yeah.
we have to bribe you to eat this food,
Hmm.
then I don't really want to eat that food. Like
Yeah.
if you have to bribe me to eat it, that must not be a desirable food.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, an important one for adults to get real with themselves on talking about earning or rewarding oneself with food.
Yeah.
Again, there is nothing wrong with that. There's physiological reasons why we love to eat. There's
Hmm.
neurotransmitter release. There's, enzymatic activity and all kinds of stuff that happens in your body when you eat that tells
Yeah.
you this is a pleasurable experience and this is a good thing. So it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you to love sweets or to love those salty, highly palatable foods. But be aware of the story you tell yourself about that food and that reward and how
Yeah.
you're seeking that reward.
Yeah. And that's the important piece is, we've talked before about just kind of the intent makes a big difference, and we could say, you know, okay, so I worked out today, so I can eat the ice cream, and that's one experience. Or we can say, I worked out today and I just want to eat ice cream. And these two things have nothing to do with each other. And that's a different experience. The same things happen, but what we're communicating to ourselves about food and how we are nurturing or damaging our relationship with food are very different.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it seems like it's semantics, but in this case, semantics, they really do matter because those are two different experiences, even though kind of the outcome's the same as far as, behaviors.
Mm-hmm. One of the other sneaky, I think, emotions for people to identify that maybe triggers them to eat is excitement.
Mm,
And maybe, I mean, excitement might be closely related to like anxiety a little bit. I mean, they're a little bit different. There's one has a positive connotation, one has maybe a negative connotation. But I I actually had a client recently that talked about some hard workouts that she had coming up on the weekend. And she was sort of telling herself, like, my body needs to be prepared for this. And I mean, I will be the first to admit that sometimes those hard workouts are laced with far more anxiety than a race because
sure.
I mean, it's a form of a test,
Yeah.
they're, it's going to hurt and you don't know if you can hit the numbers and whatever.
Yeah.
So I pointed out that eating out of an anticipation of a workout beyond the point of fullness. So we know that you have actually had the components in your nutrition throughout the last couple of days to support that training.
Mhm.
So there's really no need for you to keep eating and stuff yourself beyond the point of fullness.
Right.
And that is a form of emotional eating. And she was like, I've never thought about that before. But it was something I actually had to come to terms with and be honest with myself that I would do some of that leading up to a race because I was
Mhm.
so, I mean, I have far less training to do. I'd have all my stuff ready to go. And so you don't have anything to do except sit around and keep your feet up and try and relax, before race day.
Mhm.
And of course, I was like a duck, on the surface of the water, looks super calm and just chilling, but underneath is just like this legs going crazy.
Yeah.
So that's a form of emotional eating too, is, diving into, and of course I
Mhm.
would kind of tell myself like, oh, I need to have just a little bit more carbs, or maybe I could just go have one more handful of whatever. And so I really had to become aware of that myself and
Yeah.
understand that, man, I wasn't eating out of all of these negative emotions that we talk about. It was pure excitement and
Mhm.
anticipation. So that's something I think to be aware of too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think, and it's easy to get caught up in that, like, yeah, I mean, excitement and celebration is a good one too, like celebrating something. Um, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that at all. But if that's the only way you can celebrate or only way you can kind of honor that emotion, well, maybe you want to look at some other ways, you
Yeah.
know.
Well,
Um,
let's talk about some other ways.
let's do.
So I'm just looking, I mean, we could rattle off some things that we share with our clients or
Mhm.
that people have come up with or that we've done ourselves. But in the intuitive eating book here that I have open, it really talks about meeting your needs without food. So getting rest, getting sensual pleasure, expressing feelings, being heard, understood, and accepted. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big one because I don't think people quite make that connection with eating, but it can really play into eating choices and dealing with emotions, being
Absolutely.
intellectually and creatively stimulated, and receiving comfort and warmth. Those are all things that you can understand that are needs to be met.
Yeah.
And food might meet each and every one of those needs in some capacity, but it's not the only way to meet
Right.
those needs.
Yeah. So I think I think one of the best ways is to just do some journaling.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked about that back in like episode 31 or 32 or something. Um, but to just kind of not only check in with yourself like we talked about earlier, but to then take that kind of check in and bring that internal to the external, and this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm worrying about. Because like we talked about in that journaling episode, when we take the internal and bring it to the external, like we get some leverage over it and it doesn't have as much power and it's out in the light and it's named and it's acknowledged. And now it's like, okay, it's not as strong anymore. And I think there's other things you can do for sure, but I feel like a lot of times the most powerful one is to do some journaling around what you're feeling or
Mm-hmm.
journaling to figure out what you're feeling. Sometimes you don't know and you just kind of
Mm-hmm.
need to just start writing some stuff and they're like, oh, okay, I'm really worried about tomorrow. I'm really mad at that
Mm-hmm.
person. I think that's a great one. I think just having some other options too, of, like um, doing something that's going to be relaxing, like listening to some music you like, have a cup of tea, take a bath, read a book, call a friend, those kind of things that there's still some distraction in some way because you're actively doing something, but they're hopefully, also kind of calming things, which can kind of help bring that emotional stress down a little bit and maybe to a more manageable level. Those are common things that I recommend for
Mm-hmm.
people going on a walk, exercising, things like that, petting a
All
dog or a
great
cat.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of those things you described serve those needs that we talk about, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
getting rest, getting sensual pleasure, petting a dog or your cat and like feeling their fur and their warmth. And
Mm-hmm.
that is part of that like sensual pleasurable thing, snuggling with your pet or your
Yeah.
spouse or your kids. um I also think that this being receiving comfort and warmth, some of the things that are listed here are get a massage, put fresh flowers in your house, you know, uh, listen to soothing music, which you just described, taking time to breathe deeply or take
Mm-hmm.
a yoga class.
Yeah.
So, bringing that feeling of wellness to yourself. These are things that you don't have to do in the moment you're feeling this emotion. These are things that you can put into practice. Go back to our habits and routines episodes at the
Mm-hmm.
very beginning and start thinking about how you can put some of these things into practice, knowing yourself and knowing which of your needs tend to maybe be neglected or unanswered. Do what you can to set yourself up to have these things in your life regularly, whether it's reading a book, playing cards, connecting with a friend, going for a walk, getting in touch with nature. Any of those things that
Yeah.
help you feel fulfilled can actually help you manage and cope with emotional states better on the long term. So it
Right.
doesn't have to be something you answer immediately in the moment. Of
Right.
course, these things can work for that too,
Yeah.
but it really is putting into practice this habitual kind of routine, self-nurturing.
Yeah. I think it can help you get ahead. And I think this is what you're saying, just in a different way, get ahead of them too,
Mm-hmm.
and that the more we kind of referencing,
Rep-
referencing a different other episode, our self-care episode, the more we sort of just tend to these things, maybe a good illustration is a garden, right? Like if we just let
yeah.
it go, then when we have to get out there, it's a mess and the things are overgrown and it's a lot of work. But if we go out every day and pull the one or two weeds and we just tend to this on a regular basis and do some simple things to
Mm-hmm.
keep our stress levels down, keep our emotions kind of in check, be in tune with them, then when things do kind of get heightened, I think a lot of times they don't get as heightened, because we've already kind of mitigated a lot of this stuff that might normally contribute to it. And it's a lot
Right.
more manageable. And then we're better at managing it too.
Mm-hmm. There are even suggestions on physically expressing that emotion. So having a good cry, I mean, that can feel really good and cathartic at times. And punching a pillow or a punching bag, like really getting that physical kind of
Or a
aggression,
stranger.
punching a stranger, sure.
Oh,
Go full Karen on him.
no, that's not good.
Talking your feelings out. This actually says talk your feelings into a tape recorder, which is who has tape recorders anymore? It would be your phone or
How
whatever.
old is that article? Jeez.
I know this is an old book. We're dating
Talking
this
to your
information.
Walkman.
I know. But really just getting those feelings and thoughts out, or talking to a friend, or confronting a difficult situation with a colleague or a family member or whoever it was that maybe triggered some of these emotions in you. If you can express those emotions in ways that it may not feel positive at the time, but you know that it's part of the processing of that emotion, that can really help too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
For sure.
Anything else
No, I think I'm good.
at this
You?
point? No, I think we've, circled around the big takeaways. Just to wrap this all up, is that one, emotional awareness and expression is very highly correlated with eating behaviors, and it's something we commonly see.
Right.
Michael and I have presented a lot of ideas for identifying and expressing those emotions. We're going to link some of this stuff in the show notes so you guys can take a look. But if you are having trouble with identifying or managing some of these emotional states that you're experiencing, really go talk to somebody, find the help of a good therapist that can help you through some of this, because it really can make a difference in your life. You don't have to feel this way forever. It is temporary. So
yeah. And there's a lot of freedom in learning to identify and manage and cope with those emotions. There's a lot of free, you're not so bound to them, and they don't dictate as much, like I said earlier, it kind of puts you more in the driver's seat. And there's a lot of freedom when you're not just at the whim of emotions, when you can kind of wrangle them and acknowledge them and deal with them accordingly.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. You got a meaning in the mundane.
Let me remember what it is. I do have it because
you
I
pulling
thought
a
about
Michael?
it. I am. I'm going to make you go first because I know that I had it, and now
Okay.
I'm
Mine
but
mine is short and simple.
I love it.
And it was just last night. It's been a whirlwind since we got back. Just, coming back from camping is a lot of work. It's just like getting everything cleaned and, tents cleaned out and washed and getting everything put away and all that kind of stuff. It's just a lot of work. And I was gone for 5 days. So I'm trying to catch up for work, and I'll be gone for a couple. And Kathleen's been working a couple days. So it's just been kind of a madhouse for the last like 3 or 4 days. And I just felt kind of stressful. And last night, girls were asleep. It was kind of a rough night with bedtime. Sophie was up way late, just wound up, and Lila was having a hard time going to sleep. But finally got them to bed, and Kathleen was in bed, and I was just up watching some TV by myself. And I just got on the floor with one of the dogs and just kind of snuggled up with him, like we've been talking about today, petting a dog, right? And just was like laying on the floor, just rubbing his tummy, and he was kind of snuggled in with me, and giving him kisses, and he was licking my nose. And it was just one of those, like, I just felt everything kind of go,
oh yeah.
like, okay, things are all right. Like, it's been a stressful few days, but life is good. We're healthy and happy, and none of this is permanent. And this feels really nice.
Yeah. It
That's
does
it.
feel good. And that's one of those, being present kind of in the moment of how nice this is, kind of set aside all of those hectic, chaotic, stressful things. And
And, I
it.
thought I was kind of managing it just by like, I'm just going to veg out for a little while and watch TV. And I just, in my head, I was like, I need to pet a dog.
Yeah.
I need to do right now. I need to
Isn't
pet a
it
dog.
amazing what pets can do? I
Oh man,
mean,
it's amazing. Yeah, it's awesome.
I don't think I will ever be without a pet again in my life.
Yeah,
I
they
just
they they bring so much
like
value.
magic. I
Yep,
know.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. So, did you remember yours?
Yes, I did.
All
And
right.
mine was actually a few weeks ago where we had a really nice kind of the first break in the weather where it really started feeling like spring was coming and the sun was out for days on end and you could, put on a light jacket and be comfortable outside. And so Matt and I had our first fire pit of the season, which we have a solo
Mm,
stove out front and we bought it. We still say it was our best COVID purchase ever
I've heard they're
because,
awesome.
oh man, we love it. And it burns really hot. So you get great heat. It makes the most exceptional coals for marshmallows. So highly recommend that. But we
Nice.
set it out on our front patio just so we could have other humans, walk by or stop by and our
Yeah.
neighbors will come over and hang out around the fire. And so that was it served a purpose for us socially and just, again, filling all of these needs that we've talked about. And so we had one of our first fires of the season and we're hanging out around the fire pit and we just had one of those conversations that is very fulfilling and brings you very close to your spouse and
Hmm.
maybe even talk about some deeper things that you don't really expect. It's not like we're sitting down to have, okay, we need to
Yeah.
talk, but
Right.
just the way the conversation kind of evolves and flows. And then you get into some deeper things,
Hmm.
those conversations that need to happen that you can't always plan for, but you have to make an opportunity for them to happen.
Hmm.
It just feels so good. And it
Yeah.
feels very, um, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I mean, good, warm, connected, and
Hmm.
loving to have those kinds of conversations with your spouse.
Yeah.
So that was mine. And again, that happened a few weeks ago, but it still like lingers with me. Like, yeah, that fire pit conversation where things just, the conversation just flows and you just
Yeah.
allow it to go whatever direction. And I love having those opportunities, which is another reason why the meaning in the mundane is so important because we were just sitting out around the fire, with a
Right.
glass of wine or whatever. But here comes this conversation, and it's really important to have those
Yeah.
moments.
Absolutely. Awesome. I love that. I love those moments, those kind of
I know.
accidental, awesome moments, meaningful moments that just kind of sneak up on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Especially
Good.
with a spouse, it's always good. Kathleen and I had one of
Yeah,
those a few nights ago. Just we were laying in bed and all of a sudden we had this hour-long conversation kind of thing. Yeah, it's great.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
So, all right.
So
Well,
thank
thank
you,
you. Are we gonna do we want to do it all in sync?
everyone.
Everyone for listening
We're terrible
and
at this in
watching.
sync thing.
Yeah, we would not have made a good boy band. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening, watching. We hope you found some good stuff in this. I think, if you struggle with emotional eating, don't stress. Just about everybody does. Like it's I think probably the most common way to deal with unpleasant feelings,
Mhm.
but beginning to acknowledge and name and identify those, and then setting up some things in advance to kind of handle them is a really good way to kind of start to get control over that. So
Yeah.
if you use some of these techniques and find them useful, we'd love for you to let us know. You can contact us on Instagram at Middleish_podcast or on Gmail at middleish@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
And we always love hearing that you've shared this podcast with someone who
Mhm.
might want to listen to it and might need this in their lives. And please rate us on whatever platform you get your podcast, and we will catch you next time.